Bloodborne has quickly become one of my favorite games of all time, having only just come out over a year and a half ago. I've played through the entire story almost 6 times now, and it always keeps me wanting to come back for more. What I realized in a recent playthrough is that it isn't just the beautiful, if not at times nightmarish imagery, or the outstanding and precise gameplay that kept me coming back. It was also the soundtrack. Bloodborne's fully orchestral OST are some of the most hauntingly beautiful pieces of music to grace video games, but it's the placement of this music that really drives the emotion of the game home. When you first start a new game, you'll notice that, aside from the character customization screen, there is no background score.
Whatever happens, you may think it all a mere bad dream.
It's completely silent. And this is one of Bloodborne's strongest features, its ability to know when silence creates more of an atmosphere than music can. The silence then only helps to intensify the music when it finally kicks in. The composers, Ryan Amon, Yuka Kitamura, and Tsukasa Saito, just to name a few, studied the atmosphere, backstory, and imagery of the game in depth to make sure the music seamlessly fit into the world, and it shows. We drew on the keywords of mortal struggle and horror, which were determined at the beginning of development, Saito says in an interview with PlayStation. In order to express the early modern Victorian setting, we decided to rule out organs, woodwind instruments, and certain brass instruments such as trumpets, and so on. Rather than something grandiose, we aimed for a black and withered atmosphere. The composers wanted their music to emulate the feeling of isolation felt throughout the game. Bloodborne is notoriously difficult, and the game itself doesn't lend much of a helping hand. I think the composers helped actualize that feeling when you first put in the game, and you're met with the creators' and designers' logos, along with absolute silence. They're not here to help you. When you reach the title screen, the night unfurls begins. You're given a very slow crescendo behind a single female's vocals, the isolation mentioned before. The orchestra rises until it eventually overwhelms the vocals and becomes the main component of the mix, symbolizing the world closing in on you, trying to take over, much like the game itself. The composers have prepared you for the experience before even pressing start. When starting the actual game, you're left in silence, like I said before, creating an uneasy tone. With no real instructions besides a vague message about finding the pale blood, you're forced to venture the building with no weapons. You come across the first enemy, and still no music kicks in. This is because this is not an epic standoff between two powerful beings. This is a slaughter waiting to happen. You're meant to die, teaching the cruelty and unforgiving nature of this world. After the first intentional death, you wake up in Hunter's dream. A song of the same title begins to play. This is probably the most serene and pleasant song on the soundtrack. You find out that this is where you can level up, buy items, and customize your weapons. The score behind this area of the game creates a feeling of safety, without any immediate proof that you are in fact safe. Interestingly enough, the first time you hear music in the game world of Yharnam, it's a rather creepy music box coming from one of the buildings you can't reach quite yet. The song is Lullaby of Murgo. If you've played this game, you know that eventually you receive that music box and use it against one of the bosses, Father Gascoigne. Gascoigne is a hunter like yourself, but has been infected by the disease and is quickly transforming into a beast. The music box was given to you by his daughter and symbolizes the last bit of humanity left inside of him. When you play it, he becomes distracted and disoriented, almost as if he's trying to stop the urge to kill or let the beast take over. Eventually, the disease takes him entirely, and he's transformed into a werewolf. Even the soundtrack to this boss battle, The Hunter, has 2 brass instruments that seem to be battling each other in the left and right speakers. possibly resembling his inner struggle to fight the disease. The brass instruments crescendo until a choir comes in as one last-ditch effort to bring humanity to him. But it fails, and the climax of the song begins, a bass drum now kicking in at every beat once his transformation is complete, signifying that there is no going back. These details can be found throughout the scores of each boss battle. It would take far too long and be far too tedious to try and do every single one, but I'll use one more of the early bosses as an example. The Cleric Beast. The score named after the boss itself is an incredible introduction for the beast and perfectly sets the tone. As you walk towards the door at the end of the bridge, you begin to hear what sounds like some kind of creature groaning, and orchestral instruments begin to swell up. Again, this is after almost an hour or more of gameplay, without a background score in Yharnam. With just that in mind, you know something big must be about to happen. When the beast finally reveals itself, it towers over you as a church choir abruptly begins to sing, which not only helps the setting of a Gothic Victorian era, but actually flows with the character of the Cleric Beast. Cleric itself means a priest or religious leader, making the church choir quite fitting. In fact, the rough English translation for the Latin lyrics are, "This cobweb of sick blood, our honor is to protect the holy blood, the defenders." It's believed the Cleric Beast was once a religious leader, even a hunter, whose mission was to cleanse Yharnam of this diseased blood, only to be infected and become one of the things he despised most, let alone one of the strongest and quickest. So this video may seem silly and unimportant, but I think most people have lost the love and respect for a game or even a film's scoring. And because of this reason, a lot of directors and game designers opt out of an original soundtrack. They just purchase the rights to the most popular songs that kind of go with it, and then send it out. But there's an art to combining imagery and sound that I'm glad hasn't been lost in recent games like Bloodborne. I may be wrong, but there's definitely a reason this game has a strong 92 out of 100 on Metacritic. I sometimes find myself listening to the soundtrack on my phone or here on YouTube and having flashbacks of each battle I encountered, being transported back into the world of Bloodborne, and finding beauty in isolation.